Well, hello, creatives, community, kind folks out there. This is RPG with DBJ, and today's Future Friday. We will be ending our series on travel plans, traveling in RPGs. Of course, Future Friday. That means we're going to talk science fiction, modern day, that kind of thing, and basically anything else that anyone comes up with. As we meaning I get distracted by the chat. But anyway. We're going to end the series on travel in science fiction, and you guys brought up quite a few things during the week, whether you thought about it or not. Hello, everyone. Deadman, Janny. I'm sure there are many others in the chat. I'm just going to preamble here a little bit while everyone gets their mobiles or their laptops or whatnot to get into the chat and hopefully get the notifications, which is odd sometimes. Oh yeah, absolutely. I was sorry, Vince. I thought you were referring to actually not coming on in, but no. Here we go. So when it comes to science fiction, there are basically two. I'll say there's probably two main methods that we tend to use for travel plans when it comes to traveling in science fiction. You got yourself your transporter, your instant teleportation, and of course you've got starships. And those are the two main things that we tend to use when it comes to science fiction, when it comes to traveling. Now, of course, you have yourself, people that are on an alien world, and you've got your idea of like Star Trek with the transporters. But essentially, it boils down to flying around in a spaceship or some combination of flying around in a spaceship and instantly transporting yourself. Now, as cool as it is, and as awesome as it is at traveling around, sometimes that can be a problem. So, of course, to help me out with this, we have ourselves
Hello.
Vincent. So, Vincent, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Vincent Shine. I'm a GM and also a game designer in SPI. So not really yet, but maybe in the future. I'm working on it. I joined yesterday, and I joined again today to help DBJ out a bit.
Well, thank you, sir. You're very kind. I can use that.
That's me.
Now, one of the best things about science fiction, of course, is traveling the galaxy. Whether it's habitat to habitat, planet to planet, solar system, galaxy to galaxy. But that's kind of the worst thing about science fiction, and in terms of a role-playing game, and the main problem with having player characters having a starship is whenever they make a problem, they can just leave it, or you put in front of them a plot point and they decide to literally take a left turn and go somewhere else. So
I had this problem in Astrositas too, because I wanted to make something like a random encounter table for space travel. But they got the problem that the players usually, when they didn't know what to expect, they just flew around it. So if there's a random space station somewhere, they are not sure if it's aggressive or not. They just fly around it. So I had to basically make up rules that their travel time increases substantially whenever they try this, because they have to rearrange their route to make a huge turn and have to calculate their routes again and stuff like that, because otherwise they would just avoid most of the problematic encounters they could find, because space is so vast. It's hard to let them bump into something they can't avoid.
Exactly. And you're bringing up something that I think if you all the movies, television shows, books and things when it comes to science fiction and starships, that's where we're going to have to snatch our tools so that you won't be afraid to give your PCs a starship and still have them interact with things. So I made a mental list, and I think the list probably ended over like 25 or 30 reasons, but I of course I didn't write them down. So let's start out with one reason. You brought up time factors. Being able to, the fact that if you navigate around a hazard or some kind of interaction, it's going to really increase the distance, the time and energy it takes to do it. And I think that's a good reason to do it. If you ever see some of your favorite science fiction, you'll notice that it takes them a while to replot the hyperspace, coordinates, or if we go around this thing, the gravity, if we go straight, and I say straight in quotes, if we take our direct path, it's far less. It draws far less energy than it would to go around because of the increase in gravity, the use of resources.
Whoever played Kerbal Space Program or something similar knows that if you plan a route through a star system, you usually try to fly around planets as much as possible because you can fling around using the gravity to accelerate yourself. So it's much faster to do this in advance, calculate these routes, and then use as much of these gravitational flings that you can, then just maybe make a sharp left somewhere and then gather something and then try to do it again, because suddenly the time frame window you had to catch is gone. Yep. So losing time is a huge factor, but you also have to make sure that losing time is actually hurting them in some way. So limit their resources in some way so that they don't have rations for however long they need, or maybe they have to do a quest with a time limit or whatever. If they can just wait it out, it's just not worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, even as of course in the chat, Deadman, the storyteller, who is a storyteller, says, and use fuel. Absolutely. Of course. I mean, fuel is like, if you need to put in a limitation that that is easy for the players to swallow, is use fuel, use resources. Hey, you have to stop for what is it? Star Trek, beryllium or
the dilithium crystals?
Yeah, I don't remember. The dilithium. Anyway, they always.
I only know the German name, so
right. And of course, I hate to say it this way, but the gathering of fuel always represented the amount of plot they needed to use, because it was never like, they never told you, hey, when we travel 30 light years, we must refuel. It was always show credits open up. Hey, here's the beginning of the show. And oh, by the way, we're low on crystals. We have to stop in this location, and then something happens.
Yeah.
And then
they also had a lot of problems when they tried to give exact speeds for warp travel, because oftentimes fans would calculate how long it would actually take to travel from a place to another place, and they found out that the times used in Star Trek are actually not working. They are basically what you always say is they travel at the speed of plot. They just take exactly as long as they need to. And that's basically the gist of it. The problem that Star Trek made is that they basically wanted to give out too many information instead of keeping it vague.
Exactly. And of course, the combined brain power of the people who watch Star Trek, I mean, literally their fan base are like, half geeks, half scientists in many ways. So yeah, I mean, the minute the show started, people, we were already, getting on their little solar calculators in the 60s, whatnot, figuring these things out by hand. But it's Deadman, of course, says dilithium crystals. Yeah, dilithium crystals. Yes. I don't.
German, it's Dilithiumkristalle.
Really?
Yeah, that's what it's called here.
That's awesome. But when it comes to getting the fuel, and of course, by the way, when you go get the fuel, you have to have something happen. right? Someone gets kidnapped. They discover some alien monolith or whatnot. Okay?
Yeah, the resource they're trying to get the crystals from is suddenly alive. Shit like that. It's usual stuff in Star Trek.
Right. Despite the Fermi paradox of us not finding life, it's like they just bump into it by accident all the time, which is, that's the beauty of the show. But yes, it's like, oh, the universe is huge and there's no life anywhere, and then they just
they only just find all the places where life exists. That's the trick here, and they can also travel really fast, so they can skip all the boring parts. So.
But in addition to the fuel portion of it, you mentioned using like gravity wells, a slingshotting, those kind of things, and as well as the opposite, which is many of our heroes have to dodge or avoid detection or something. So there's always asteroid fields, planetary rings, nebulas.
Follow a comet.
Yep, follow a comet. I mean, so and of course, statistically speaking, we could if we were real scientists, we could measure those things and realize that, well, asteroid fields maybe aren't as large as science would have you make it believe. Rings around planets aren't as dense as it would appear in the artist's renditions and such. But it doesn't matter. That's fine. The reality of it is that, like Azala says, all the boring parts of space, right? The reality of it is maybe it's far more boring than we think it is. But we want action. So of course, if the player characters have to avoid the enemy and there's an asteroid field in front of them, the asteroid field is as large as it needs to be for them to have to navigate through it. Otherwise, it would take them too long to try to go around it, and they can use that as a hazard to hide or whatnot.
What you always must think about is it's not about reflecting reality, but it's about reflecting what we perceive as reality, and that's especially true for science fiction. You have to think about what the players might think of when they hear the word asteroid fields, because usually it will be maybe the scene of Star Wars where they're flying to the asteroid field and C-3PO says, "Oh, chance to fly through a meteoroid field," stuff like that. That's what people have in mind when they hear the word, and that's what you have to portray, not the actual reality. You can use the reality as inspiration, but you have to tell your players what it's actually looking like when you do that, and you have to describe way more than when you just rely on what they already know and what they already have in their heads.
Absolutely. The one I have to give credit to the Star Trek role-playing game, of which I haven't played and I don't have, but I've seen quite a number of reviews, and one of the things that they've incorporated is that each player character, when they're on the starship, has a role in how the starship operates, so that there isn't just like one pilot doing all of the roles, all of the checks, and everyone else just sits back. It's like there's someone controls like the sensors, someone actually controls the navigation, like plots the navigation, another person actually physically pilots the ship, physically meaning like they do a little touch screen thing. But there are someone is an engineer and controls the engines. So they went out of their way to ensure that the player characters each have a function as the starship moves. So go ahead, please.
Sorry, are you familiar with the Bridge Commander, the game?
No.
It's a really neat, interesting game where you but the basic concept is that you are a crew on a spaceship, and each of the persons has a different job on the spaceship, and you don't see what the other people see. You can only see your own station. And the neat thing is that the captain has actually nothing to do, but he can see all the other stations.
Oh, okay.
So he basically only gives commands and maybe says, okay, engine more energy and divide the energy more to the weapons so the weapons guy can shoot better and stuff like that. It's not really that good, well made as I heard, but it's really interesting to try this, especially when you got somewhere with a couple of geeks and made up a bridge out of a couple of chairs and stuff like that and just build your own spaceship. It's a really neat idea.
I think, someone with enough technical experience could do that now with, like, say, a Zoom account and quite a bit of, like, OBS experience. Like, you could project in front of each person they're playing online, and project in front of each person only what they can see, with the captain that can see everyone else's display, and then we as viewers could see everything, and then the captain can, like you're saying, we need more energy from the engines, and then the navigator, you have to watch out for these hazards as such. It would take some juggling and some technical experience, but I think you could actually run a role-playing game online where each of the players only sees what their station and each other, but the person playing the engineer can only see the engineering station, and then the captain sees everyone else's station and sees the numbers or stats go up or down, and then the game master starts inserting hazards, and the engineer doesn't know that they have to avoid the asteroid field or something or whatever. That would be really cool.
That's actually possible. I've played a couple of games where it's based on chat, and you can send private messages to people. So you could try to give out only specific information to specific players. So the engineer only gets engineering information, and the navigator only gets navigation information. And they have to communicate to coordinate all their stuff. That would be possible. What I want to mention is that Jared talked about Faster Than Light, and I absolutely love Faster Than Light. I included a lot of the mechanics from Faster Than Light into Astrositas. The interesting thing about Faster Than Light is that it's basically a crew management game. You build up a spaceship, but you also have to micromanage your crew and the doors of the spaceship. So you can basically, when there's fire somewhere, you can open up the doors from the outside to suck out the air of the area where fire is. So the fire goes out, but while there's no air in there, no crew can go in. So you have to constantly send them away to different parts of the ship to give more bonuses to shields or more bonuses to weapons, or put out a fire here, or close a breach there. And I try to use that in Astrositas too, that you can take care of different hazards inside the ship and use modules with actually persons instead of just being on the bridge and pressing a couple of buttons.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, in the chat, they're bringing up different versions of that, like with the Azalis's. I know there's a VR game like that.
Yeah, Tesla mentioned it's Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator.
That's what it is. Artemis.
That's what I mentioned at first.
Yep, Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator. Yeah, those things, and of course the role playing thing. I think we should take away from it is, like, try to figure out a way to give each player something to do, if it doesn't already exist in the game. Unless the starship travel is just very short. Essentially, like Star Wars, sometimes the travel from one planet to another is really just it's as short as it needs to be to get from one world to another. Like, hey, we're going to Tatooine, so it takes as long as it takes to get to Tatooine, right? There's not a huge gap of time.
Yeah, they actually calculated it somewhere, how fast the Millennium Falcon actually is, and he's stupidly much faster than everything in Star Trek. I think he traveled 1,000 times light speed at one point or something like that. So, yeah.
But I've thought of other things that limit starship travel, and a lot of these are from writers, science fiction writers, and you can include them in the game. For example, like yesterday, we talked about hyperspace, like one-way travel where you stop your motion, but the galaxy continues to move.
Yeah.
And so it was a one-way trip, basically, very, very quickly to go one direction as the galaxy would spin away from you, but very difficult to go backwards. I've seen, I've read science fiction where it's it requires black hole farming. Either hyperspace required each ship to have a miniature black hole in them, and you had to like put in mass. You had to acquire mass to fuel the black hole, or the black holes would be used up, and the people that had starships were always trying to buy, sell, steal, harvest black holes. And so that could be possible too. Is essentially it's the fueling idea, but far more pirate like scavenger type.
What the basic three types of fast light speed travel are and represented in Stellaris pretty well, as far as I am concerned. There is warp, which is where basically works like in Star Trek. So basically have to a mode where you can travel really fast, but it's relatively slow compared to other methods. Then you have hyperlane travel, where you have basically huge installations at specific points, and they are connected like roads. And you can only travel around these routes, and you have to get through these specific points first. And the last one is wormhole travel, where you basically create one of these hyperlane travels from a specific point to another specific point, but you always have to travel through these specific points, and they are fixed. I think it's pretty interesting. In Stellaris, wormhole travel works a little bit differently. We basically have a huge radius where you can travel everywhere, but you have to create stations everywhere to increase this radius. So you could also make something like that you always have to install some kind of station somewhere because you can travel further. You could make it so that you have to repair or use up specific stations to where you want to travel. In Astrositas, I use this approach as the default method. So you travel through specific from a station to another station, and I also try to make the travel from the stations to the other station pretty dangerous. So I take it at a dive engine. So you travel through something like a wild water raft with your spaceship. So it's pretty dangerous to do, but it's super fast. But you also have the possibility to obtain other methods of faster than light travel.
Yeah, you a couple things that you absolutely hit on is the I guess we could call them like a Stargate style travel.
Yeah.
Where society has created these, like, they always seem to appear as like a ring, and they are in different star systems, and essentially you pay passage, or you have the right to go through because you're part of a faction. You take your ship, you go through one ring, and it's essentially a man-made wormhole, and you appear out of the ring somewhere else. And of course, that can be as instantaneous as you want, or it could be, like you said, like whitewater rafting, where it's very dangerous to navigate it. For example, I read a science fiction book where today people who have mental afflictions, we found out that they are expert pilots in traveling these multi-dimensional spaces, because they were able to rationalize the fact that reality isn't the same. And there was a young girl that had a multiple personality, affliction disorder, but she was an expert pilot, and there was a company actively creating these pilots by like psychologically torturing them, and there was a way to shut it down. But there could be a semi you can insert a semi mystical or psionic or otherworldly element to traveling through wormholes.
There are two more examples I can think of here. This in Dune, you need spice to travel faster than light, so you need a specific substance. And in Andromeda, there you have the slipstream engine, and the slipstream engine can only be operated by humans, so it's not possible for AIs to faster than light travel, for example. For specific alien cultures, it's also not possible, as far as I remember, because they don't have the brain structure or whatever.
I forgot about Andromeda, and only humans could go through the slipstream, which I found a little bit odd to me.
Yeah, it said something like the slipstream routes are similar to human brain structures or something like that. So they can do it instinctively, but one of the crew members couldn't do it for some reason. Later we found out that she's some kind of weird, super powerful being, and not really actually something like a human. And the spaceship itself couldn't do it. And there are some episodes where AI captures a ship, but they have to get human navigators to faster than light travel, so they can't do it on their own.
Yeah, the in Dune, the guild navigators were able to do it. They to very summarize it very shortly, and even though the books go into far more detail, essentially the spice made them psionic, kind of, and they had the brain power to understand how to travel from one place to another. In a way, the opposite of the human thing. It was their brains were of a higher level for them to do the calculation.
You think they got a limited amount of future sight?
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually read the books, to be honest. I've only managed to get some short descriptions of a lot of things, because it would be a huge time investment to get through all of them. But the story is really interesting and really groundbreaking for the time it came out.
Yeah, the Dune, the movie Dune back in the 80s or whatever.
I think it's 90s, but I'm not sure. And they want to make a series out of it.
Yes. Oh, I hope it comes back. Although I found there was a televised version of it that was maybe 6 to 8 hours long. BBC version of it, which I far less money involved in it, but I felt it captured the essence far better. It went deeper into the story. But anyway, the guild navigators were expressed as like they didn't look human any longer. After basically living in spice, like they were just breathing it in. But in the televised version of it, they were more like wizards. They would transcend themselves. So, and yeah, their lips. Jared says, "It is by will alone I set my mind in motion. It is by the juice of Sappho that thoughts acquire speed." Yeah, there's this saying, like a mantra, like a chant they would say over and over again as they would, take these vials of spice, and their mouths would have these stains on them, like they were like drug addicts and such. Dune, 1984, Deadman, the storyteller. Got to get it from Deadman.
I think what we can take out of this for our role-playing games is that if you limit FTL travel in some interesting way, it can really influence your story. Either by having some weird resource that you need, or a specific type of person that you need, or a specific engine, or some specific place you have to go first. Don't just give it to them. Make it interesting. Make it something limiting. And that's something you can take away for a lot of role-playing games. If you just hand your players stuff on a silver plate, it's usually not as interesting as when you limit it in some way and they have to think creatively to obtain it. Don't just give them the information, let them work for it. Maybe do a side quest for it. Maybe do something that they don't just run through your quest lines and it's not interesting, but let them think a bit more and work more for it. And the more you work for it, the more interesting it gets usually.
Absolutely. I would say there's one last tool you could use, and I would say use 99 other tools before you use this one, and that's the classic classic Star Wars. Right now, it just doesn't work. it's the it's the Han Solo. Let's go into warp drive, and it doesn't work.
It's similar to the car which suddenly doesn't start for some weird reason.
How about every horror movie we've ever seen where the cell phone doesn't work and the car doesn't start? Despite the fact that cell phone coverage is like 99.9% everywhere, and modern day cars, built within the last 15 years, pretty much start regularly unless there's something really wrong, in which case, why are you traveling to unknown places with uncharged cell phones and cars that are about to break down? I'm not sure, but yes, it doesn't work. Deadman the Storyteller threw in a chat, The Children of Dune 2003. I believe that was the BBC extended version, and that one really showed all of the different factions going at each other. Now that's which the movie didn't quite hit on. So yeah, but yeah, absolutely. Don't, please, as game masters out there, please don't do it doesn't work. just because you don't want because they're getting away from your plot. Like, don't do that.
At least let them work for it. You can always say there's something broken for some reason. Maybe there are parasites, maybe you flew too near to whatever, maybe there's background radiation. You can always find some reason. And then you only have to say, okay, you get X, and then it will work again. And they have to take time to get X, and then you can go on with your plot.
Yep, and like you said, background radiation. There was a supernova. There's solar flares. There's some kind of weird magnetic field or something. Like
make a D100 list. That it's super easy.
Yeah, if you just give it just a little bit of thought, I guarantee you could come up with 10, 15, 20 reasons per day. Just think of your favorite sci-fi and go, that's a good thing, and write it down, type it in, and then you can let the dice fall where they may, and that would be kind of fun too. The players say, hey, guess what? Whenever you start your engines and you want to go somewhere, roll on this table and see what happens. Jared P says that once in 1,000-year solar flare shows up. Of course. but at least you could make a story around it. Maybe habitats are starting to, close their blast windows because of the solar flares. Maybe the solar flares affecting all travel, so that could be a part of it. But I think what we're trying to say is, just like Vince said, make it a story element, like make it part of your world, even if it's temporary, as opposed to just punishing your players because they decide to get in the starship and run away from your plot.
What I just mentioned, you could also make something like a time limit to space travel. So, for example, you can only travel when there are solar flares, which is like once a month or stuff like that. So you have an artificial limitation to how often your players can travel, and they have to get another place in this specific time frame before the time ends, or they're just floating in space for a month. So there are a lot of possible ways to do this properly, in my opinion.
Hey, Star Trek even did the plot random wormhole. The wormhole only opens at a specific time and place, and then when you exit the wormhole, again, the same thing, right? Where there's a wormhole at the end of the solar system and it's only open for an hour for a month, right? Like each month there's a wormhole that appears. Or maybe there's a method of plotting out where your next wormhole may show up, and the starship has to use, a tremendous amount of energy or fuel to open up a wormhole. But it's only possible when you're a certain distance away from planetary surfaces or something. Like you could absolutely do the so-called random wormhole, and the PCs are stranded in a solar system, for example, until the wormhole shows up next week, or 72 hours or something like that.
Or what I just remembered, the new series Star Trek Discovery has this special engine, this spore engine, where you can basically teleport everywhere you want to go, but you have to have these special spores which they cultivate inside their spaceship, and they don't really know how they work. It's some kinds of a mycelial network that goes through space. And you can also, this brings a couple of interesting points about how this works. They sometimes have to use up most of their spores to make a specific jump, or have to do a lot of jumps and use up their spores. And also they have to regulate this ecosystem, basically. They have to, sometimes it gets infected, sometimes they have to try to start it anew because they run out of spores. And you can basically make up something they have to care for so their spaceship does work.
I love the idea of like biological systems that you have to cultivate, or I guess the science fiction version of watering it and giving it sunlight, finding specific resources on planets. And even if those resources change from planet to planet, maybe there's in engineering at one planet is the lithium crystals, and then another planet it's some kind of plant matter, and then it could be a series of random things to keep the spores in stasis, and it's not always the same element. Now I wanted
Jared mentions teleports only have a 99.9999% accuracy setting. That's 0.0001% though.
Yeah.
And this actually happens in Discovery too. At one point they make a very risky jump, and then they land into a different reality.
That's always the thing that happens, right? The oh, that'll never happen to us, and it invariably does in science fiction stories. And Azala says the thing that just amazes me about human beings. Like, that sounds very human. We've got this awesome tech. No idea how it works though. It just does. What could go wrong? And I mean, just today, nuclear power.
Yeah, just wanted to say, hey, we got this awesome huge bomb. Let's just use it.
Yeah, we have no idea what the effects are. And sure, let's just turn on nuclear power plants. Why not? I mean, it's radiation. What could go wrong? I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that being careful is not a universal thing.
Yeah, the thing is also, it's super hard to be careful, because if you really want to make sure that something works, you would have to test it for decades, basically. And who does that?
Exactly. Well, Larry Niven created an alien race called the Puppeteers in Ringworld, or not in Ringworld. He has them in his world, but he created a race of aliens that their entire culture is about being paranoid. They're complete cowards, and they created. They're so cowardly that their radical scientists created starship travel, and they banned the study, imprisoned them, and put the technology away for 50,000 years, not because it was wrong, but because it was correct. and the whole idea of the puppeteers was because they found the ring world, and the puppeteers befriended alien races. And the whole reason they befriended other alien races was to push them in front of themselves, because they knew the galactic core was going to explode in, tens or hundreds or thousands of millions of years. And they wanted to be prepared because they needed to escape. And of course, they were never going to do it. So they were pushing all of the other alien races outwards so that they would encounter all the hazardous things, kind of like pushing chickens into a dungeon and having, get just basically they were using all of the other alien races, humanity and the Kazin and these other alien races, to encounter every hazardous situation so that they would never have to, and they would pave the way. So when they found the ring world, they were like, hey, we're going to move to the ring world, and we're not going to do it ourselves. We're just going to get the other.
They are basically the lab rats of them.
Yeah, it's so silly. But I wanted to flip over from starships to teleportation, transporters, warp rings, like
Stargates.
Stargates. That's another thing that in science fiction has built-in limitations. Stargates are usually built in a specific location, where you step through from one place to another. You may
also had the ring transporters. Did you remember those? That they looked like mini Stargates coming out of the grounds, and then you teleported in. They go to another place, and then you're teleported to the place they got to. So you always have these physical objects which travel to the place you actually want to go. So theoretically, you could attack the rings.
Sorry, Azala says, when scientists first detonated a nuke, they thought there was a chance it would burn away the entire atmosphere. They did it anyway.
Yeah, Jared mentioned Farscape had a living ship. And yeah, I also put this in Astrositas because I always need to mention Astrositas at least 10 times a day when we're talking about science fiction.
Hey man, when you're passionate about something, dude, it's like yeah, you got to. But yeah, the transporter idea, the Stargate idea, is a good one. Again, you're going to have to put some limitations in it.
Yeah, the big thing is that Star Trek only started to have transporters because in the original series it was too expensive to make shuttle starts and landings all the time. So they basically had to find a cheap way to get them on places. And later they realized that it's pretty OP if you use modern terms for it, because having something to teleport anywhere you want to go, you have to have limitations, or else it would just break any plot you would ever make. Because you could escape from everywhere, you could get anywhere, you could destroy anything, because you just have to warp in bombs. You have to find limitations, you have to find ways to limit it, or else it would be just completely out of hand.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the first thing that comes to mind are in Star Trek is that you can't transport through like force fields, shields, some kind of energy field.
You have to be able to scan the place you want to beam to.
Yep.
So some interferences in the atmosphere can prevent beaming.
They often, in the Next Generation, you would often see them take off their little Velcro comm links and put them on other people, and that just transport that individual.
To log on. They log on onto these communicators. Also, you can't transport usually while in warp.
Yep. There was a transporter chief who was basically there to make the quote unquote skill rolls to analyze what you're transporting perfectly. So there was a little bit of a skill / time factor involved, that it wasn't.
Yeah, and sometimes it also went wrong, and something you got damaged by transporting. There are also some rare occasions where they got sick or got some weird side effect from transporting. I can't remember this Voyager episode where two of the characters basically fused.
Yes, and there was one where a character split in half. Not okay. They existed in two places at once. The actor Reichert. They transported him off a planet, but the one Reichert stayed on the planet, but they transported a physical copy of that Reichert onto the ship and went away, thinking that they got him, and they left the other one on the planet.
That's the weird thing about this beaming technology. If you use it as described, you're basically killing the person you're trying to transport every time and just create a new version of him. So
that's dark. That's like Deadman talks about the Pandora gates from Eclipse Phase. Essentially, the idea that you can download your brain and go into another body is you're committing suicide over and over again.
I think they also in Star Trek there were situations where they stored the information from the person in some kind of buffer, and then basically you transported them, but the other part, the manifestation on the other side, were delayed, so they could store them in buffers and bring them in later. That was a way to store them indefinitely when something went wrong.
Yeah. Jared says life is abstract, though, like the idea that every time you fall asleep, you die. There are, you are absolutely correct. There are people who think about that idea that every time you fall asleep, your consciousness like resets, or when you wake up, you're not exactly the same person that went to sleep. So we would get used to it. I think if that technology existed, the people at that time would be used to it because you would be part of that time period.
But the weird thing is, if you think it through, if you really die and you basically just created a clone, then you wouldn't exist anymore after the first time you beamed yourself. Your clone wouldn't know it. So
yeah, I don't think Star Trek would want you spreading that information around when they pulled you on the ship. Please go back to your time period. But Jared P brings up the point of says we're currently playing a game in Sigil, which I hate the fact that it's pronounced Sigil when it's Sigil. Anyway, he says although it's based on fantasy, the idea of teleports being misfired by incorrect keys, incorrect components, incorrect travelers, etc., and that's a great thing to use to limit the transporting teleporting idea, that you need specific like coordinates, specific types of energy, specific
or simply it takes up a lot of energy, and you can only transport from a specific place to another specific place, like they do in Stargate, for example. You can't just Stargate anywhere. You have to have a Stargate at the receiving end, and you have to know the address of the other Stargate to get there. And sometimes when the Stargate is in another, I think, galaxy, you have to have a sufficient power source to create the Stargate between the wormhole between these two Stargates. So they have some limitations in there. And I think it's a pretty genius way to manage this whole teleportation stuff. One thing you could also do is having something like creating a portal, which is open both ways. So you can't just teleport somewhere and attack, because the other people could attack you back.
Yeah.
Or got onto your ship when you got to theirs. So you have a balancing factor in that way. That would also be a possibility, yeah.
Right, like it essentially the portal. It's not a transporter, but an actual like warp portal, a doorway.
Yeah, similar to the Portal game, where you create these two holes, and you can basically just walk between those. Yeah, that would also be a possibility.
And sure, you could, a player's automatically going to say, well, I open a portal, I shove a nuke in it, and then I close it down. But maybe the energy it takes to open it, keep it open, and close it might have a limitation in itself, right? Maybe it takes upwards of 15 minutes for the portal to completely open, and on the other side, say the enemy side, they can actually see this energy opening, which would limit, just the open, shove a nuke in and close it down.
Or do you have simply a limit of how much you can go through these portals, or what specific things can go through? Maybe engines or devices have to be off when going through and can't have any energy because the transport would interrupt that.
Right.
There are possibilities to prevent shit like that. I actually did in my game also, because I have one ship core, which is basically Link Space, I think I called it, which is based on teleportation, but I have never have a pure beam like in Star Trek, but I always have opening portals and transporting someone back to your ship, but not the other way around, and shit like that. And when the portal can't, for example, let through ciphers or enigmas, so these things which could basically be bombs, while being active. So you can't activate it and throw it through. You have to at least go to the other side and activate it.
Yeah, you definitely have to have a limiting factor. Like Jared P says, a gate effect, the difference between a fun travel adventure and summoning an alien horde. He also says teleporting often has similar narrative issues to time travel. Absolutely. There's a book series by Dan Simmons called Hyperion, and in that series, humanity has they use teleportation portals like we use public transportation. You can get a card and you have a code based on the planet and the location you want to go to, and essentially there are places like train stations and bus stations that people go to, and they go up to the doorway and they slide their card or insert their card and they insert the code, and then the gate opens up and they walk through to the other side. And it's hideously expensive. So people who have the money use this technology, but the average person actually has to use starship travel. And so starships actually became, unless you're rich and you just want to go on vacation, traveling from planet to planet in the starship was actually low class, because the people who had money would use these gates, because you could just literally grab your bags in your hand, slide your card, and you're in. You just walk straight on through, and there's no like energy. How to explain it? Like, for example, there was an infinite loop river that went from planet to planet, and the rich people would go on these cruise ships that would go down this large river. It was almost like an ocean, really. And they would go through a hoop and it would take them to another planet. And they would continue down the river and it would go through yet another planet and another alien atmosphere and stuff. It was kind of interesting to do it that way. And so there was this infinite river that went from around the galaxy, essentially. And but one thing that you could probably do with Stargates is what if the players are part of a crew that has to take a device with them to get to some place and then open up the Stargate. So
they did in Stargate Universe something like that, where I'm not sure. Did you watch the series? It was the one with where they traveled in this
Hyperion.
Ship?
Hyperion.
Was it called Hyperion, the ship? I'm not sure, because they had basically they were going through a specific route, and the first ship, they sent it basically a drone ship before they got there, and the drone ship dropped stargates on all the planets on the route before they got there with their actual ship.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was in Stargate. I can't remember. But yes, yeah.
It's not the best series, but it had some interesting ideas at least when it comes to these things. So you basically maybe you are one of these ships who have to drop stargates everywhere to help someone else accomplish a specific goal. So you could basically only go back but not forward with your stargate.
I think that would be a cool mission of sorts. Like you know the player characters have to transverse hazards to get to where they want to, open up the Stargate, and then this allows the people they work for or serve to come through. Or maybe there's something like the lithium crystals or something to get back on the spaceship. They have to physically travel there, then open up the Stargate, and then the gate allows them to take it back onto the starship or a habitat or their
Yeah, just imagine in Stargate they had the luxury that they knew a lot of codes for Stargates from a huge database they found on in the first planet they got through. Imagine they didn't. Imagine they have to travel to the specific planet first to find the code.
That's actually kind of cool. And they could begin to make a library of the different codes. So for example, maybe they know how to track or find, or they have to, well, one adventure would be finding all the Stargates themselves. It could be they can detect it through energy. Maybe it's finding it through ancient texts or lost civilizations. Then they get there, then they find the code to it. Now let's say the player characters have 5 codes. They can only go to those 5 locations. It's not as if they can just travel anywhere they want. They might go through a Stargate, and that Stargate may belong to an alien race that they don't have any, treaty with. And they say, you can't, no, you can't use our Stargate. And if you come through here, we will arrest you. We will shoot you on sight. And they go, wow, well, let's see. We don't want to use that gate, but we do need to record it. So we have to go to the planet in the first place to get the code, but they don't want us there. But that planet has our code, and they can come to us. So in order for us to strike back, we need to send a group of the PCs have to go to the planet, find the Stargate, get the code, and then open it just to get our troops to go through to attack them back, which could, that's a great plot for a game.
Yeah, well. That's actually a cool idea.
So yeah, transporters are fun. I'm with you. I'm not really a fan of the Star Trek transporter. I like the portal idea.
Yeah, the portal idea is much better. And even in Stargate, they had some limitations. For example, you can't go through a Stargate in both directions, just in one direction. But they found some ways around it in later seasons, where they could basically send a limited amount of energy from one Stargate to the other. And they had this iris, which you could block people from getting through the Stargate. And when the Stargate opens, this huge amount of plasma comes out, which can destroy you when you're standing in there and shit like that. They had some limitations in their Stargate travel.
Yeah. Now we're not going down the rabbit hole of time travel here,
but just out of interest, in Back to the Future, they found some interesting ways to get their device to work. In the first movie, they tried had to find the energy to do that. In the second movie, they had to take care of specific problems that came with their device. And in the third movie, they had to find the speed to do it.
Yeah, that's right. And it was all about the the side effects of using it.
In the first movie, it's basically you need plutonium and you need to go faster than 88 miles per hour. These were the 2 limitations, and they used them in the movies to great effect, actually.
Yeah, that's quite awesome. There's even, if you were to to write down Back to the Future on a piece of paper, it would not appear the way it was executed. It was executed excellently, especially the first movie, but all three together was executed pretty well. But on paper, it just doesn't. If you were to tell someone, "Hey, we're going to get this, weird defunct sports car and turn it into a time travel machine," you're just like, really? That's dumb.
The thing is, I think most movies which are really good, if you break them down to their premise, they always sound silly. I mean, Indiana Jones is a guy with a whip and a hat which tries to get treasures. It's Star Wars is about a couple of space wizards going around solving conflicts.
Yeah.
It's all in the execution. It's the same thing with role-playing games. You can have the best idea ever. It sounds great in your head, but actually it sounds silly to someone else. It's just all about the execution. It has to be solidly made to be interesting.
Jared says the plot is actually really boring. It's basically someone just running errands for a scientist for 3 movies, which is absolutely correct, right?
Basically, yes.
He's the kid that lived next door, and he's like, Jerry, come on! And he's just a bored kid who decides, like, he's just an old dude, and he's crazy.
Yeah, basically all the movies are like that. They basically, you have to do something for me, and that's basically the plot.
Yep. Azala says, I always liked Eclipse Phase's idea of quick travel. Just beam your consciousness to another body. Except you got a problem there. What happens when you arrive on the other end? You don't know what body you may arrive in. You could arrive inside of like a VR interrogation room before they put you into a body. There's a whole lot of problems.
I think they did this in the Stargate Universe series too, because there was a specific type of technology where they could switch body with someone who has the other part. I think it was a ring or an amulet or something. And basically, if both people touch it, you switch bodies. So you could basically talk to your loved ones at home, but you would be in a different body. And they could be on the spaceship for the time and maybe help with some specific problem. So you could, that's actually an interesting idea. Let's assume you have a spaceship, but you only have a limited amount of people you can get on there, but you need to have more people for specific problems. Maybe you need you need a biologist for a specific planet because there are spores or shit like that. Then you have to switch out one of your crew members with someone at home.
I always thought that would be a great idea for an Eclipse Phase crew, where the crew are all digital consciousness, and the ship also has like very few biological bodies and a bunch of like scientific robots. Maybe like two large industrial robots, a probe, and things that may not look humanoid. And then the player characters would have to choose amongst themselves which bodies to download into to use for specific tasks whenever they arrive somewhere else, which would be very, very, very interesting. Each game, a player might have a different body. Maybe they're in a crab or spider-like body one game, and then the next one they're in an aquatic exploration drone, and then in another one they're in a giant construction mech or something, and then maybe a biological body to deal with other to have interactions with people. It would be pretty interesting.
There was this science fiction series, I think we mentioned it already, where people from the future switched into bodies in the present to prevent stuff from happening. You could do stuff like that to explore other planets. You basically switch bodies with one of their natives there, or a group of natives each time.
Hey, Avatar, the movie Avatar is a perfect example. And I know they're making like 4 other Avatar movies back to back.
What?
James Cameron is filming 4 more. Well, I believe he's doing them 2 and 2. So he's filming 2 more Avatar movies now, with the plan to do 4 total Avatar movies. But if they still use the same blue people, I think it's a disservice, because the movie is about the Avatar program. So why not move the Avatar program to other races on that world, or to other star systems, and going into other bodies, right?
Yeah.
Because that was the original point, was humans built a biological body, grew it, and then went into that body so they could talk with the people there. Oh, and of course, Deadman the Storyteller says the television show is Travelers. Humans from the future inhabit bodies today, but those people died, and they take over their life from people who have died, and many of them have died in like drug overdoses, and suicides, or been like beaten to death and things like that, and then recovered. And so some people have been in a hospital, and then they switched their consciousnesses. All right, babe. Love you. Oh, after she lets me do this, so I have to love her for that. I'm sorry, reading, just going into the chat a little bit. Quantum Leap. Yes, very long running show here, about the what is it? The moving from body to body and solving the issues that were happening in that person's life. Yeah. Body jack. Netflix. Carbon. Oh, what's the name of the show? Please, someone tell me. Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon, a Netflix show based on.
Yeah, I watched it too. It's basically Shadowrun.
Yeah.
Or Eclipse Phase. I mean.
Yeah, Eclipse Phase. It was
a little bit.
Yeah. Rickard says better as a book, though. Yeah. I've heard people say that. The execution may not have been the best yet again, but lots of story ideas you can steal from for RPG ideas about.
Yeah, having the conscious building alone is super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, waking up and finding out that you were killed. You wake up in your body and you find out that you've been on ice for 10 years, 50 years, 175 years, and you have to figure out why. There's a book that I read called Voice of the Whirlwind by Walter John Williams, and it was like a far future noir. He wakes up like 15 years later and has to solve his own murder. He had the program where you take a copy of your brain, but he hadn't renewed it in 15 years. And so his life went on, and then he was killed. And so he still had the insurance. So they wake up his consciousness in an old body that they grew for him. And it's a 15-year-old out of date consciousness. And he finds out that all the people he knew and his friends and stuff, all their lives have gone on, and they change, and he comes back, and they're just like, they are walking on eggshells around him. They're not telling him what's going on. And so he's got to figure out, like, why did I wake up, and why did I die, and why is there a 15-year gap, and why did I delete my memories from the past 15 years? Like, why wouldn't I want to know that? And so he's finding clues he's left for himself and stuff. It's pretty good.
Oh, there is this movie where the person has amnesia and he tattoos clues of what happened to him on his body all the time. Oh man, I'm so bad with names. I'm not sure what it's called again, but it's a really interesting movie. You could do something similar with a science fiction story where you wake up maybe from being frozen, and someone else maybe wrote something on your body, or you find clues somewhere else. In the Born Identity, he had implanted this little flashlight with a number.
Yep. I mean, in many ways, the Born Identity is perfect for that. The Arnold Schwarzenegger Goes to Mars. Wow.
Names. Total Recall.
Total Recall. Thank you. Which can be, those stories are awesome, but can be a little hard to do in a role-playing game, because essentially the PC is playing a character that is not completely realized. You as the game master are basically telling the player character, your memories are not your own. You're not really a good guy. You're remembering things incorrectly, right? And so you really have to have really good players who are willing to say, like, hey, I'm going to make my player character, but you as the game master can actually alter.
Or you could do something completely out of hand where the GM builds the character for you, and you don't have your character sheet, and every time you try to do something, you remember this specific aspect of your character, so you can write it down in your character sheet. So, for example, when you take the Born Identity, I found out I can I know how much I can run in this specific height, and until my hands begin to shake, and I have a stupidly high perception and stuff like that. And you find it out while playing that you have these specific skills, and you have to find out why you have it, why you can do these specific things, and try to find out what happened before. That would actually be interesting.
It would. You would have to have a lot of trust, but man, I mean, like you said, if you see the Born Identity, it was a mystery, right? He found the, like you said, he found the little, I don't know, laser.
I think it was a little bit laser flashlight with when you projected it, then the number showed up.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, he found he finds the he goes to the bank and finds the safe deposit box and opens it, and it's just average items in the front, and he's just like, oh, passport, oh, that's my name, here's some cash. And then he feels the bottom and opens it, he sees like the gun, and then like 30 passports with all different identities, and he's like, whoa, wait a minute, let's go. Let me put it in the bag and run as fast as I can. And like you said, when he meets the young lady, he's like, I don't know who I am, but I know, and he starts rattling off the things he's.
Yeah, I can run a mile in this height until my hands begin to shake, and I know this person is the highest probability to have a gun, and stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because you would never know. Like, okay, the player character runs into an airport, and the player doesn't know whether he has the skills to operate any of the vehicles till the game master says, by the way, you know how to pilot a helicopter and fly a plane. And he's like, really? Oh yeah, you actually know, you're pretty good. And your estimation, the third helicopter from the left is probably most fueled, given
or if you want to be more devious, you could only know it when you try it, because you only have the muscle memory.
Yeah, well, he was attacked on a park bench.
Yeah, and then suddenly he just took out the two police officers,
and he's just like, whoa, wait a minute.
I now want to play this game so badly.
There's in Eclipse phase, there's an introductory game called Ego Hunter, and all of the player characters are playing essentially different characters, and they're in different they're in different morphs. They're in different biological and mechanical bodies. And it's an introductory game because at the end of it, and I know I'm giving it away a little bit, but well, I'm giving it away, the entire plot away. But anyway, you find out at the end that all of the player characters are actually one individual who's trying to recollect the fragments of his own personality that have gotten out. And so all the combined skills and attributes of everyone in that particular adventure are the actual skills of the adversary at the end of the adventure.
Wow.
So and there's some individual that's like very, like ultra rich and powerful and sends fragments of his own personality out to have fun, to manipulate things. He's basically like this Machiavellian type of villain, but his fragments went out and their personalities diverged. They went off on their own. And he's sending these agents out to try to recollect his fragments because, of course, he's a Machiavellian individual. He doesn't mind killing himself off, especially if it's only, if one portion is only good with guns or whatever, kill that person. One is a business person, kill that one off. Oh, that one's an entertainer, get rid of that one. But come to find out that this person mastered all of these skills because they had the money and the time and the energy to do it. and so the PCs have to reconcile their personalities because their personalities are completely artificial, right? Hey, we're the good guys. And you're like, no, actually, you're a 1/6 of an individual who's a bad guy. So does that make you you? Does it make you a consciousness? So I like that idea. I think you can really play with that.
You could also make something like an AI which has a split personality, or maybe an AI that is created out of the personality of a dozen different humans. There are a lot of possibilities here.
Yeah, yeah, but we did kind of get away from, slightly away from the
I think we switched from the travel somewhere to switch bodies to what switching bodies would be like and what interesting aspects you could make from it. So it's not that far off.
No, I suppose honestly, I guess that's the logical conclusion. Like traveling through space in a starship to instantly transporting to then not even needing a transporter, you just move your consciousness from place to place. But I think we can all agree that find the problems, because the problems, the limitations, the hazards are actually where the story's at. It's not doing it instantly and then going, oh well, there's no problem here, we're done. It's finding all the issues with it.
Yeah.
It's
always when you create something, always try to find the complications first. Make something cool and then try to find out what might be the limitations and how could they be interesting.
Exactly.
I also thought about the idea of maybe you only have a limited crew on a spaceship, maybe only a couple of people, and every time you want to get new people, you have to basically infect other people with the minds of your actual allies. So you have to capture them and switch their minds.
Ooh, that's pretty bad. Or like you said about the, going to other alien races, maybe there's like instead of Star Trek where they just use like a hologram to protect themselves, maybe they have to capture or replace the minds of aliens to talk with the aliens, to interact with them. So everywhere they go, the PCs are playing aliens minus the culture of the aliens. So they're humans, but they're inside of, insectoids.
Yeah. That would actually be interesting, like a role-playing game where you explore alien civilizations and problems and biology and stuff like that, and you have to find out what this civilization is like you are in and what you could do with it and how they interact with each other.
Yep. I mean, even the television show Travelers, it's kind of funny because in Travelers, they're humans from the future, and they come back in time, and they have to do things in present day to prevent whatever hazard's going to happen in the future. And the show meta games the idea in a role-playing sense. They're metagaming the idea that they're in human bodies today and dealing with issues that they've already solved in the future. Like, for example, there's a character that comes back, and the character goes into a guy's body that's a drug addict. And one of the other characters in the show is like, listen, you need to operate. We need to get you drugs because we don't have time to wean you off of your drug habit. So they start coming up with these methods to operate in our time by trying to circumvent the limitations of the people they're inside of, if that makes.
Yeah, and I just had an idea. What if in a future society humans are actually pretty powerful, but we could predict the future pretty well. So we knew when an alien civilization is about to die out, and we can't interact directly with them, but we could switch bodies with them. Something like that would be actually pretty interesting. So we have to you have to have an agenda, and you have to interact with the specific civilization at the same time.
Oh, maybe to help them out. Maybe we know that they're about to die off. They don't know it, or in some ways maybe we have to have some kind of way where we switch technologies or something.
Yeah, maybe we have to get something from them to actually survive, but we can't. We have no direct means maybe to get to their planets, and so we have to switch bodies.
Yeah. What's the movie? An excellent movie, although the ending kind of like knocks you in the head. There was a movie, Contact, and in the movie Contact, the space program, I believe it's called SETI, where we send radio signals out into space, and we are scanning space for radio signals to come to us. And so one day, we get those signals, right? We get those signals, and we download a method to create a transport vehicle, and we have no idea what it's supposed to do, how it's supposed to work. We just know that we can build this thing. And they basically, the whole movie is about them building an alien craft to contact this other alien species that has contacted us, and the drama that happens involved in, like, for example, there was a terrorist attack that destroys the contact vehicle, basically. And
what if this method I just mentioned is just a one-way trip, and you have to build a device to get back?
Yeah. Wow. And there's a time limit.
Yeah. Shit, this could be so much drama.
Wow. You get there, you talk with the alien species or what have you. They give you the information. Now you have to make your way back home, and you don't have time to stop anywhere, but you just know we've got to be back by a certain, I don't know whether it's 10 years, 50 years, 100 years or something, but you still have to make it back. That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Shadows.
I now have an idea for a role-playing game.
I know. I'm gonna end it with this, and because I know someone out there, you probably know it, someone else knows this. There is a role-playing game about paradox. There's I don't know if it's a time travel role-playing game per se, but I believe it is. Here's the idea. All the player characters have to come up with things that they know are going to happen. And they write down the things that are going to happen. And I believe there's a series like very minor, medium, and very bizarre things that will happen. And then they start playing the game. And for each event that they make come about, like a predictive element that comes about, they get a bonus of some sort. I don't know what the role-playing game is, but it's like a railroady role-playing game on purpose, created by the player characters, not the GM. And I don't know the name of it. And it's something about like a paradox where okay, for example, a player character says, I will find a gun, I will break into a bank, I will get into a car chase, like I will hang off of a cliff, right? And so the game master gets those things together and then starts to make the adventure, and the player character tries to drive the plot to have that thing happen. And when it happens, they, as their predictions say, then they get a bonus when that thing happens. And I don't know the name of the game.
Never heard of it.
Wow. Yeah, it's a weird. I know it's a small pub game. I'm not sure if it's like a one-shot micro game, but I heard
could very well be. Maybe one of these 200 words things.
Could be, but yeah, it was a really weird, like paradoxical kind of thing where the players are specifically trying to make things happen that they already know are going to happen, and weird. Anyway, but that could be a great idea for like a time travel thing where the player characters know something's going to happen because they basically said it's going to happen, and then the plot starts driving towards those things happening, and the game master just puts a bunch of hazards in the way, and they're like, I know at some point I'm going to hang off of a building. I just don't know where. We're in the middle of the desert. You know what I mean? Like it could be something strange like that. Event Horizon, yeah. Build a thing to travel faster, end up in hell, and then it comes back and everything's horrible. Yeah. Why does everything boil down to a Warhammer 40K? The default hellscape.
It's the same thing with Dune. Everything comes back to Dune somewhere when you talk about science fiction.
Yeah. Oh man. But anyway, guys, yeah, we're going into an hour and a half here. I want to thank everybody for taking part in this. Of course, next week we are going to try two very bizarre things. We're basically going to blast the entire RPG community with everything we hate. It just gets on our nerves, you know. It's and we're going to try to end like the last 15 to 20 minutes of our live show with some people joining in. I'm going to put the link into the Discord, and remind me, please, about a half hour into it and 40 minutes into it to do that. And I'll pop the link into the Discord, and you guys can join in. Just remember that you are agreeing to be live and recorded. so just be prepared. And get your camera and or mics ready, that kind of thing. So
yeah, and try to make sure that you are muted when you're not talking. So it's have some kind of discipline, or it won't work that way.
Exactly. It'll be chaos, and we'll stumble and fall over each other, but why not? The only thing to do is to do it, which is exactly how this darn show even started. It was just, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen about it. I might as well just do it. And come to find out that I love it. So it's awesome. So thank you, Vince. Is there anything you want to plug, sir?
Not really. Maybe we can talk about other things in the future, but yeah, there's nothing else. I think we found a lot of interesting ways to travel in science fiction settings, a lot of very unique ways. So yeah, it was a fun time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for Vince for joining me as well, because my mind is always in chaos. So just having you here to be able to like focused me down a little bit. I think that's cool. And of course, you're a sci-fi. Your thing is science fiction anyway. so that really helps a lot. And I think we came up with not just I think we came up with a ton of story ideas too.
Oh yeah. I have an RPG I want to make now. Even if it's a 200 word, I'm not sure yet, but let's see.
Travel home. Hurry up. That would be awesome.
Now we have a title.
Yep, exactly. So guys, thank you very much. I will be seeing you Monday. So the first thing at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Monday morning. Not sure what time period it is for you guys, but hope you join in. So good luck and have a good day.
See ya.